Hello everyone. In this video, I want to dig a little bit deeper into Noteey Sync. This feature is still in beta, so there are some changes that will probably still happen with this. But I want to dig into this feature, some of the complications with it, and potential issues that you might run into while you're setting this up. It is a little bit, again, it's new and it's somewhat confusing. I've even seen in the Discord where other people are having some similar questions I had when I was walking through this. So I want to help people out using this video, and this will hopefully make it a little bit easier to understand how this Noteey Sync works. So first thing, Noteey Sync is a way to simplify getting your information from one device to another. This is not an actual built-in or native syncing process that happens automatically in the background. So there are some manual things that you will need to do. And some of my findings, first off, is that one, the term sync and Noteey sync feature here is that there's really no syncing going on within the Noteey app. All the syncing happens via the cloud storage itself. So the first thing here is sync terminology is really more of a save to cloud. So if you think of it that way, I think it'll help reduce any confusion you might have with this particular solution. So it is more of a save to cloud, not technically a sync. And this sync feature also replaces the old file location. Previous to having this feature, or before you turn this on, you would notice in Noteey that you have a place for your backup and restores, and then you also have a storage location for the general files and content that you put into Noteey, like pictures, PDFs, and so on. So this new folder will replace the old files folder, and I'll kind of walk through that. There is also a refresh functionality or option here when you're doing this sync process. There's really two, right? There's sync to copy to cloud, and then there's refresh to actually pull that data into the other machine that you might be trying to sync to and make sure it has the same copy on it that you do on your primary device. So that is called refresh within the app, and it is destructive. So as soon as you hit that and you get the option to do that refresh, it will overwrite, once you commit it, it will overwrite everything that you have in your Noteey app on that system. So you can think of it as doing a restore. So anything that you already have in there, projects, boards, tags, cards, highlights, etc., will be overwritten once you hit this refresh option and you commit to it. So just understand that. So there is the potential for data loss if you do that. Then the sync feature is not automated, as I mentioned before. This is a manually performed user-based sync or copy between the different devices. And then there are no conflict resolution prompts or warnings within this particular process right now. So that's another piece of information you should know. Again, I'm pointing out and I'm putting out warnings here where if you have a lot of stuff in Noteey right now, there is the potential for overwriting things if you don't follow the right process flow. And I'm going to outline a process flow that I use and that I think would be helpful for others to follow when you're doing this. So first off, let's kind of get into the back-end architecture of how this is set up. The first thing to think of is when you're in Noteey, you have a configuration to set up a backup restore folder. This is going to be helpful as part of your process when you're doing this syncing. And then there is a sync configuration now. So this sync configuration or folder is going to be the cloud storage folder. So wherever your cloud storage that you're using, whether it's iCloud or Google Drive or OneDrive, you will create the folder for the sync process and have it on that cloud storage. And that cloud storage is what's going to get you the ability to sync to other devices. So make sure you pick one that actually can be used on these multiple devices, and two, maybe even add additional privacy, like with iCloud and advanced data protection. That's the one I'm using because it also gives me that end-to-end encryption that doesn't come native within the Noteey app itself. but you do get privacy because it is a local first system and nothing is sent to the cloud via Noteey itself, other than this new feature now that copies to cloud. So when you think of from the client perspective, then what you really have here is a push and pull mechanism. So the primary system that has the that first state of content or information in it that you want to be your master copy, and then you sync that first to the cloud. This will be the push client. And then the other systems that are out there that you want to sync up with that master copy, then those will be the pull clients. And this is just my terminology. You can phrase or term this however you want to, but the push will always write to the cloud storage, and then the pull will always read and restore from that cloud storage. So quick understanding. I actually have a visual here that I can show to make this a little bit simpler. So let's say we have two different systems here and they each have Noteey on them. You do have a backup folder set up, and this is going to be key when we walk through our process. But when you want to set up that cloud sync feature, you will first set up that cloud storage folder location. Then you will hit Noteey sync, and that sync will push all the relevant data to that particular folder. And this, you're not going to see this really look like it's sending something across the internet per se. For you, because that folder is local on your computer, it'll just look like you're saving it to your local system. But behind the scene, that cloud service, whether it's iCloud, OneDrive, or Google Sync, will sync that in the background. Once that is synced to that cloud storage, then you will from the other device that also has Noteey on it and is at the right version, you will set up the sync, and then you will do a Noteey refresh, and that will then pull it down over here. And once it pulls it down, it will overwrite anything that was already there in that Noteey application and put it to the state of what was synced to the cloud. Now, the thing to understand here is that now this system here basically becomes the more updated one, and when you do updates on this system here, what you will need to think about is the reverse operation. So everything here in the cloud is still based off of, from a Noteey sync perspective, is still based off of this system. But once you start making changes over here, you will need to do the reverse. So this becomes the master, and then you want to hit the Noteey sync and then push to the cloud. And then from there, from the other system that you want to pull it down from, you want to actually do the Noteey refresh and then pull on that system. So there will be this back and forth that you'll have to do if you're switching from one device to another pretty often. Now, what happens in the back end here, from what I've found, is that looking in the old files folder, this was used for, as I mentioned before, storing all of the content that was put into your Noteey application, and on the boards they got stored here. What I've noticed that by using the Noteey sync function here, I have my folder, and that's on iCloud right here. I have my backup folder, my file folder, and my sync folder. Remember, the file folder is from the older version, which is not being used anymore. But if we take a look in there, we can see all the files that were previous in that system, and then compare it to what is now in the new sync folder. And what I've found is that we sort by kind here. We will notice that there are a couple new different files that show up in here that did not show up in on the old files folder. You now have these in the sync folder, and what you see is these two back files. So this makes sense because what's happening with the sync process is that really all it's doing is doing a backup of the annotations and the data, and it's putting it into these files, and then on the other system is basically just doing a restore of these. Now all the other content that's around it is stuff that's in your boards and in your projects and things like that, in your library. these two files are the ones that really seem to be what makes the difference for this sync process. So when you hit sync, these two files get created, and when you hit refresh, these two files are restored to that system that you hit refresh on. Now what you could do here, and I've actually did this when I was doing my initial setup, was that I hit sync on my primary device, the master, so to say, and then on the second device, when I was setting this up, I hit the sync button again, thinking that, okay, sync means it will actually sync to this particular Noteey device in the application, and everything will kind of get restored, and everything would be in line one-to-one to what was on the primary. And that is not the case. What had happened was I had deleted everything out of the secondary, so there was basically a blank slate, and it created its own Noteey back files. So when I tried to do a refresh, what had happened was it refreshed nothing because it had created these files from nothing. So what you could have a scenario of where from your master you actually do a good sync and backup of these files, but if you hit sync on that secondary device before you actually refresh and do the restore, you could overwrite these files, and things will kind of get out of whack for you. So this is very important to remember, and it's key because there are no warnings that pop up right now with the current beta that signals that, hey, there is a a more recent version of information that's out there. Another piece of information too is that there are no say backups when you're doing a refresh and you're restoring from that cloud copy. There are no backups of what was already there that happens either. So I'm going to walk through a process here that kind of steps you through the way you should probably use this feature. You can do it however you want to, but this is the way that I've found to be less risk averse to you losing any data. So let's go ahead and show what that looks like. So it's pretty simple. You go to all of your machines that you're going to use Noteey on, and let's get them all up to date. Next, you want to install and set up your cloud storage service if it's not already. So if you don't have Google Drive or OneDrive or iCloud set up and configured, go ahead and get that done. Then once that's done, you want to create your sync folder on the cloud storage. Once you have that done, let's go to that primary device where you have all your information that you want to send to the cloud so that the other devices can sync to that there. Once you go to that device, you want to do a backup. So first and foremost, I would say do a backup on that device just in case anything goes wrong, you have something to restore back to. Then you want to enable the sync feature and configure it with the cloud storage folder that you set up in your cloud storage. Then you want to go ahead and hit the sync to create those backup files that I mentioned before. All this will happen in the background, so you don't need to worry about those files or those backup files that I mentioned. And you never know, at some point that may even change to what those backup files look like previously, or they may even be hidden from you going down the road. Once you perform your sync and it pops up and gives you the message that that's done, just verify that your cloud storage has synced those files to the cloud. Sometimes that could be something that's instantaneous. That may be something that you manually have to do. What I've done on the iCloud side, and I've noticed you can do this on OneDrive as well, not too sure about the Google Drive, but I went in and I set it up so that that folder that I'm using for this cloud storage, I forced it to always have that file local, and so it will actually sync to the cloud and always sync to my local device. Make sure you do this on all the other devices that you have as well. So as part of this step, force the download of that particular folder to that local machine so that anything you drop in it, it will get synced and it'll always be local on that machine and up to date. In most cases, as soon as possible, depending on your internet connection. Now, on the secondary devices, after you've confirmed that the sync process has happened and you've done your initial sync from the primary, you can go ahead and create your backup on that secondary device as well. Now, if you don't have any data or anything in there, there's a fresh copy, and technically could not do the backup. But if you have anything in there that you may want to keep or restore later, you should probably go ahead and just do the backup. Then once your backup is done, just make sure a second time that this sync has been done to that local machine. Make sure you've set up the same force to download to that machine so that everything's already set up. You won't have to really do this too much after it's done, but as your first step through this process, I want to make sure you're 100% sure all this stuff is done. Then let me see, go ahead and enable that sync within the tool, and also configure the cloud storage within Noteey. And then once you have all that set up, just do your refresh. Now, it sounds like a lot of information and a lot of steps that you're doing, but most of these steps are just the initial setup. But in practice, once everything's set up, the steps are much, much less. So let's walk through the actual tool now and show what that looks like. So the new sync process is in the settings. So if we come into settings, as I mentioned before, you do have the backup and restore here. So make sure you do your backups as you need. The sync option here is where you can go ahead and enable this sync feature. And as I mentioned, even though it says sync, make sure kind of get that understanding that this is really a copy to cloud functionality, not really a sync in my opinion. But set this up to whatever your cloud storage folder is in here, and from there you're really done with that step. That's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Now on the primary device, you will click on this Noteey icon where it has these arrows, go down to the bottom, and you have these two buttons here that you can click on that will either sync or refresh. Remember, on the master copy, you want to make sure you sync it first. Sync that first to the cloud storage. If this is the secondary device and you're trying to update it with the latest version of your say Noteey Vault, then you want to do a refresh. So you hit the refresh, and then it will actually do a restore. So let's actually do this right now. I can show the functionality with one system. I have two, but it will make the video a little bit complicated. So let's go ahead and let's do a sync. We'll see it gave me the message that it actually has done a sync here. And because this is local, there's really I don't have to check that it uploaded it into the cloud because it's already local. So I can come in here, and as an example, let's set up a new project. Set up a new project, and we'll just call this project X. And if we go back to projects, we see we have this project X here. Now let's say we're on the secondary system, and I wanted to do a restore. Now, following the logic that I mentioned before, when I did the sync process, I did not have project X in there. So if I do a restore now, what will happen, or a refresh as Noteey calls it, this will get deleted. This will not exist once that refresh is done. So let's go ahead and just put this to the test and prove it real time. I'm going to do a refresh. It tells you all local data will be overwritten by the data in the drive. So this is your cloud drive, and this action cannot be undone, which is why I mentioned to do a backup before you do either one of these steps, preferably always before you do a refresh. That way you can assure that you're not going to lose any data, because if you happen to overwrite anything that you didn't intend to, you can do a restore and at least get that back. So let's go ahead, we will confirm that. And it says cloud data may not be the latest. Say, do you want to force restore data from the cloud? So they are warning you here that you will be overwriting data. So basically take this to heart. But if you've done your backup, this should not be that big of an issue. We will go ahead and restore. We see it syncing here. And immediately in the background, we can see that that project X project is gone because it completely overwritten it. So that's basically the steps that you go through to get this up and running. I threw in a few things there to help with reducing any data loss that could potentially happen via this process. And yeah, I think it's a nice feature to have. Before, what you'd have to do is you'd have to export this, then somehow get it over to the other system, which technically could still be cloud storage, but you're doing a full kind of export or backup, and then you're sending that entire file to the other system and then restoring it from there. This way is a lot cleaner, I would say, once you have all the back end pieces set up. So hopefully there will be some improvements when doing the restore, where if you do the refresh here, that potentially there's an automated backup that happens behind the scene to make sure that your data is protected before overwriting it. And also when you close the application, let's say I created that new project in here or added some things to a project, you don't get prompted to do another sync. So that's another concern or issue you could run into, where you made changes on this device, you completely forgot to do the sync to upload the cloud version of it, and then you start working on that other device before syncing these things and not realizing that you may have a project that hasn't been updated to its latest version. So in that case, figuring out how you get these things in sync, I'm not too sure. You may have to come in here, as I mentioned before, and there may be an export of just one version or one project, and then that you import into the other. Now, I have not seen a way that you can export at the project level. Being able to export individual projects could be the workaround if you do get out of sync, but that feature is not there, or at least I have not seen it. If anyone has seen it, or Noteey, if you're listening to this video or watching the video, then maybe you can chime in and if there is a solution that's already out there. But other than that, I'm going to end this video. Hopefully this was insightful and provided some value. If it was, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And until the next time, have a nice day.